Bharatdasan University Entrepreneurship, Innovation and Career Hub, and the Department of Women Studies, Bharatdasan University. So I also extend a warm welcome to the resource person for today's session, Dr. Maria Primondes. I hope I am pronouncing it correctly. So I wish you, ma'am, a warm welcome from my behalf and on behalf of Bharatdasan University for this webinar come course. With these words of introduction, and I also extend a warm welcome to all the participants. I think about 42 have joined, and I think maybe people join later. So with this welcome, I hand over the session to Dr. Manimaila ma'am. Manimaila ma'am will formally introduce the resource person, and then the resource person can take the charge. Thank you. Madam Manimaila ma'am, your mic is in mute.
Yeah. I'm happy to conduct the session today. I thank Bharatdasan University, the Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, and also BEC, Dr. Prasanna and Dr. Ravichandran, the Director, for giving this opportunity to conduct a short-term course on general development. I'm doubly happy to invite the first speaker today, Maria Raimundes from Galicia, Vigo, Spain. She is the feminist writer, translator, researcher, independent researcher, novelist, etc., etc. She has a lot to contribute to the feminist alliances also. She will be talking on the topic forging feminist alliances at the time of physical distancing. In fact, we keep saying social distancing. That is not the right phrase to be used, because we talk about social distancing and we talk about inequalities in the society, and therefore reinforcing the same is not right. And she has used the right term, physical distancing. So this context of physical distancing and the pandemic, what kind of issues that the women have been facing in the society, the entire globe, and what kind of, she'll be talking on connecting the issues like the health and economy. As far as India is concerned, of course, in the initial period, it was not much, but now every day there has been an increase of the COVID positive cases also, corona positive cases. And in this context, we have already been there for 2-3 months staying back, and now it is slowly opening, and we are not able to physically move. And what kind of alliances is possible given the kind of issues that are emerging? On the one hand, the gender-based violence are increasing, and women are disproportionately affected in terms of everything, all the issues, be it poverty or the health or the domestic violence and other issues. And there is also a need for the public intervention, because public health, say for example in Tamil Nadu, the public health system is strong, and therefore we are able to address to a certain extent. And wherever it is not, then it was difficult, and the private sector could not come forward or not permitted in the beginning, though it was extended later. And the kind of the issues that the women in the working class women, particularly in the informal sector, that you all know that women are mostly found in the informal sector, how they got affected. And given that the food security is to be met managed by the women, there are other issues also. When men who used to go out in the social constructed context stay back and involve engage themselves there in the household, what kind of issues the women face also emerging. So all these issues will be connected and highlighted by Dr. Maria Raimundes. A brief introduction about her. On the one hand, I told that professionally she's a translator, basically from English, and specialized in linguistics and language, and she really fights for the language to stay with its tradition. And she has been widely traveling for various assignments, including consultants to gender training, gender manual development, etc. And apart from that, the other side of the coin is the writer. She's a feminist writer. She writes on children's books also, and novelist. And she won several awards, national and international awards. She's a very popular person there in Galicia and Spain. We may not be knowing much. She's a very, very on the one hand independent person. And she also invited many scholars from Tamil Nadu, the feminist and novelist poets, and translated their work into their language also. So this is one of her contributions, and she does exchange of relationship. And this is one side, the professionalism. On the other hand, she is a grassroots feminist and social activist, where she has been working for the past 30 and odd years, coming to India and also other countries, the most wanted countries like Ethiopia and others. She mobilizes funds and being founder of Implicadas, and also donates her own earnings also to strengthen this particular organization, and try to support the kind of issues to be addressed, particularly the women empowerment. Here in India, she works in Tamil Nadu with Trichy Women Empowerment Corridor, and in Salem, where you have this female feticide and female infanticide. She contributed to the project, and it is on, and also through People's Development Initiative, and Karaikal tsunami affected area. And similarly, in several other, she has been invited the European countries, the Pakistan, the Philippines, Haiti, etc., where she has been contributing a lot. Particularly, we have been associated with on this issue for a long, and she is more of an Indian, informed about Indian conditions. And with this, of course, I shouldn't take her time. I welcome you, Maria, for this interaction, and you can go up to 11:55, and we can have 5 minutes interaction, because already 11:70. So welcome, Maria. You can start now.
Okay. Kalai Vanakkam. Can you all hear me, I hope? Yes. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction, Manimele, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to join the session. It's a bit early here, but I'm really happy that we have the chance to share some time, and this is actually one of the things I will be touching upon during my presentation. So let me first share my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint while we speak. Okay, so I hope that you can see the screen now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So as Manimele was saying, I'm going to be discussing today how we forge alliances, feminist alliances, in times of physical distancing. So I'm sure that during this course, I have seen the program, and it's quite interesting, and I've seen that there are many interesting speakers. I'm sure that you will all enjoy their presentations. And you will have the time and the chance to go into the details of the effects of coronavirus from different perspectives of the coronavirus pandemic. But whenever we have a feminist approach to a situation such as this one, we always need to have two kinds of approaches. The first one, which, as I said, you will be discussing in the coming days, has to do with the short-term analysis of what is happening. So we know, and this is not just for Tamil Nadu or for India in general, we have seen this in every country in the world, regardless of whether we are in the so-called developed countries or developing countries. We see that in this pandemic, women are bearing the brunt of it from many different perspectives. Because after all, a pandemic doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the previous situations in which we were living. So what the pandemic has done is it has brought to the fore situations of inequality that were already present in society. So we know that whether in the West or in Asia or even in Africa to a large extent, we know that women are the ones who are being affected in the economic side of it, in the health side of it, also because of the overburden of care. We have seen that the gender violence rates are increasing, the numbers are increasing whenever people are forced into their homes. We know that violence increases, violence against women. And we also see that there are also the measures that the states and other agents have taken, which of course need to be analyzed. And as I said, you will be doing that most likely in the coming days. But today I'm here to speak about a different kind of approach that we need to combine with this one. And it's a more comprehensive approach that for us feminists in our local communities, but also internationally, we need to keep in mind. And it has to do with a more comprehensive view of what is happening. The pandemic is also a chance for us to refocus our priorities or to bring or underline aspects that we already had in our movements, but now as the pandemic is bringing them into the public discussion, we need to take this chance to make them work. And also, it is also a chance to articulate responses across borders. We have seen that the pandemic does not respect the borders that the nation states have decided to draw. And we should also think that activism has to work in that way. And we have to do it inclusively and intersectionally. And what do I mean by this? I mean to say that whenever we speak about women, we already know that women is not a uniform group. We know this from a feminist perspective. We have to think about class, we have to think about caste, we have to think about race, we have to think about migration, we have to think about sexual orientation and gender identity. All these aspects need to be comprised whenever we are analyzing the effects of the pandemic. We know, for example, in our short-term analysis, we can never forget that, for example, transgender women in Tamil Nadu have been excluded from aid from the state because they do not have their ID papers. So we cannot forget all these aspects whenever we are talking about the pandemic and a feminist understanding and reaction to it. So I'm going to be focusing, as I said, on how we refocus our priorities. And my goal today is to just give you some ideas and then hope that you take some action and that you share also some examples or ways forward after I finish with my presentation. So let us go through some of the aspects that I think are important for us as feminists working both locally and across borders to refocus our priorities now. So, of course, the first aspect we all think about when we discuss the coronavirus pandemic is health. The pandemic has shown how we have been looking at health in quite limited terms as a movement. So many times, of course, we have been focusing on issues such as reproductive health, menstrual hygiene, and all these things are very important. We must not leave them aside. But we also have to think more globally about health as a basic human right. And we have to think about how accessing health is also marked by gender. We know that in the intersectional discrimination of women, most of the time, whenever there is a health problem in the family, is women as carers in the patriarchal setup who are again burdened with taking care of others. But this burden becomes bigger whenever there is no public health system in place. And when I say public health system, I mean a quality public health system. We know that, for example, in Tamil Nadu, health has become a commodity in many countries in the world. We see it, of course, the example of the US, which is very extreme, in which people die because they do not have access to healthcare, despite the fact that it's supposed to be a developed country. But as long as we allow private interest to commodify health, we're going to be in a situation of risk, especially for women. So whenever there's as I said, there's a health problem in the family, especially for women who are in the marginalized communities, and even those who are middle class or better off, it means that they need to have resources to face it and then the time to face it. This pushes women out of the labor market, it puts them in a risky situation, so it has all sorts of implications. The need to have a strong public health system has been shown as a priority in the current coronavirus crisis. We know that one way in which the private sector enters the health system is by making public health weaker. So this means that only poor people access or want to go to the government hospitals, while those who have money go to private hospitals. So we need to really work as a feminist movement. We really need to work on this matter, and I don't think that we've made enough. We need to create coalitions with activists who are in the public health sector, so that governments invest in public health, and this is quality health coverage. There's quality health coverage for all, which means that we do not have to pay whenever we want to have proper care and just leave public health for the poor. And the same could be said for public education. And in Tamil Nadu, we have also, Manimele mentioned that I'm a translator and I'm an interpreter, but I'm also an activist for the Galician language. And we see that in Tamil Nadu, there's already, like here, a divide between those who are poor and have to go to Tamil medium schools and those who have some money and can go to English medium school. So even in that context, a weak public health service is determining who gets quality education, and in this case is leaving behind those who are Tamil speakers and putting them at a disadvantage. So we really have to work for a strong public health and public education system, which is a basic ground for the exercise of human rights. Another aspect which has been brought to the fore with the coronavirus pandemic has to do with food security and the environment. This is, of course, not new for the feminist movement. This is one of the top priorities that we've been working on for many years. And this means that, of course, food security is allowing farmers and women farmers to have access to land, to have access to proper seeds, just to once again, not allowed the multinationals to become the owners of our land and our food and make a commodity out of them. But now the pandemic has also shown how this aspect has made us very vulnerable as a species, actually, to disease. So the more industrialized the agricultural sector becomes, the more problematic it is for biodiversity, the more problematic it becomes for environmental protection and also for the livelihood of women in rural communities and in indigenous lands. So we are becoming more vulnerable to disease and to epidemics such as this one, which is not going to be the last one that we will face, because we're removing biodiversity day by day with these industrial practices. So one of the priorities we need to, again, address as the feminist movement is to protect Indigenous women's knowledge, lands, and priorities. This is a matter that is also crucial in places such as Tamil Nadu and India as a whole, where we know that lands are being encroached for other uses. We know how the water resources are being overutilized many times for things that have nothing to do with food security or with preserving the environment. We know also with urbanization how the cities are growing. Migration from rural areas is also an important problem for cities and the creation of slums. So we see that everything is interrelated, and the feminist movement really needs to stop and address these things, because as we are seeing now, they are going to be crucial in the future too, if we want to really be in a situation to not just face a future crisis of this kind, but to prevent them. And of course, another aspect that we have discussed and that we're seeing during the coronavirus crisis is the economic vulnerability of women. Wherever we look, again, everything I'm saying is the same for the West, East, North, South. Wherever we look, we know that women are the ones who are being unemployed, who are overburdened with household activities, even in the time of lockdown. So unless we discuss these dynamics, we are not going to create a society in which women can actually exercise their rights. So we have been focusing a lot of energy sometimes in the economic independence of women and women accessing the labor market and accessing jobs and discussing how women are in low-paid jobs and in the non-formal sector. And all these things are, of course, important. But unless we address how the household is organized, and that means discussing the role of men, or the lack of roles of men, or the lack of the contribution of men to household activities and sharing household activities in our homes, then we know that all these things are going to reach a point in which they cannot move forward. So we think that, of course, we have been discussing this in the feminist movement for a very long time, but we really need to introduce this in all our activities and all our priorities. It's not enough to discuss the economic impact of the pandemic on women and look at it from a marketplace point of view. We have to really look inside the households and see what kind of dynamics are happening there. Find not just the problematic cases, which is the majority, but also find pockets or places where men are actually contributing to household activities and therefore creating a space in which vulnerability is less for women and for everyone. And of course, we have discussed already, and Manimele mentioned this in her presentation, we have seen this in every society in the world, how the lockdown has increased the rates of gender violence. So this is a very interesting aspect, because many of the time we hear that we hear reports of gender violence happening in the public space, and of course this is important and we need to address it, be it in the workplace or be it on the streets, and also sexual harassment on public transportation. But many times these reports actually hide the worst place or the most dangerous place for women, which is the home. So now this lockdown situation has really given no excuses anymore to address the homes and to open up the homes and check what is happening in there. So of course we need to continue addressing violence that happens in the public space, but unless we realize and we stop creating these myths about the home as a safe haven for people, well, it is not. For most women and children in the world, the home is the most dangerous place for them to be in. And this is something that the UN has already said, but we really need to consider this, because lockdown is really showing that the place where women get raped is not late at night on a street, it's mostly in their own homes. So we really need to reconsider how we address gender violence, and we need to debunk the myths that many times the media, films and television are spreading, which is just myths that try to make women afraid of going out, and they're not encouraging women to fight for their presence in the public space, and also they're not tackling the real issue, which is in the home. And this is again linked to what I discussed before. It's in the home where we need to really start dismantling patriarchal values. So we have seen that these are the common topics that we're all seeing in the time of coronavirus. These, of course, as I said, are not new. They were already there. But coronavirus has shown us how in these exceptional conditions, we are also seeing how these priorities get shifted and how they force us to see connections. Now, as I was saying, these are all things that are happening globally. So we know that we have to work, of course, in our local communities, but we also have to articulate global responses, because just like coronavirus is not a disease that has stuck to a single place, we know that multinationals and many times the roots of all these things are not just in our local communities, they're also articulated globally. So we have to articulate our global responses too. And how do we do that at a time when we have to face physical distancing? Well, we can see this as a time for opportunity. And I'm going to just share some examples of how we as feminists can use this time to create new opportunities for our movements to become stronger. The first aspect is what we're doing today. So there are many things that are going online, and this has given us the chance to take part in things that we could not do in the past, because of course I cannot travel to Tamil Nadu very easily whenever I want to. So we can have the chance to utilize technology to bring people together, to get trained, to get to know each other, to share information, to create strategies. This is something that we couldn't do so much in the past. The technology was there, but we're not used to. accessing it and to work through it like we're doing now. So the pandemic has forced us to explore how we can organize ourselves and how we can conduct events of all kinds, be it trainings or be it arts events. So we really have to take this opportunity to create events that help us get organized, see common priorities and see common strategies. Now we know information is shared far more than ever. We hear reports about how the pandemic is impacting women in different parts of the world. So we really need to have that connection. But of course, thinking about, as I said before, this intersectional and integrating approach to whatever we do. So we cannot just think that what is happening here is just the same as what is happening elsewhere. We have to sit together and see how situations are similar or different and where we can find the meeting points. And then it's also a time for opportunity because institutions have the time and have the chance to support activists in a different way. So we are speaking about how women are affected by the pandemic and in their economic life. And we see that now institutions such as the university in this case or others are organizing events. So let them always be paid events. Let us provide for those who are, for the grassroots activists who are might now be out of the job. I'm thinking about, for example, the street theater troops who are usually working in Tamil Nadu to spread different types of messages. Well, now is the time in which when we organize online events, we can give them the chance to get some payment for them. Because one of the risks that I see in these kind of events is that many times we think that online is for free, and that leaves a lot of workers without any income. So let us think about online events as if they were live and in-person events, and always think about paying for the time of people who have to prepare for their conference or for their contribution to a round panel or for sharing of their art. And we also have to think about providing accessibility. And when I speak about providing accessibility, and we will see this now in the caveats, I'm speaking about different kinds of accessibility. It has to do with, for example, the need to have subtitles for the deaf or have the ways for blind people to access what we are sharing. But it also has to do with other aspects, which I call the caveats. And of course, we've seen how online events and online meetings can help us continue with our work and can help us share and be present in a way in which we couldn't before. But we must not forget that there's a huge digital gap, and the women who need to participate the most, and the women who are in a more marginalized situation are precisely those who are on the other side of the digital gap. So it is our responsibility to also think about how we are going to provide access in this time of physical distancing and participation to those who cannot join Google Meets or Zoom, or who do not have a computer, who do not have money to pay for data on their phones, and what we can do as a community and as a movement to make sure that they are not left behind. Because as we have seen from the first part of my presentation, it is precisely those women who are mostly affected by the coronavirus crisis and who are there in the grassroots working to change their communities, who have to have a say in all these discussions and in articulating our responses to coronavirus and to how the patriarchy interacts with it. So we really need to find ways and formats that allow for this participation. So either we can find ways to provide a digital access for those who do not have it, as I said, providing data for their phones, or making sure that other types of connectivity come to their villages. So we can put pressure on our local government so that they provide this. We're not just talking about healthcare, we're not just talking about food, we're talking about human rights here and the possibility of articulating a response together. So this should not be seen as some accessory or something that's not really relevant at this point. And we can also find new formats that allow for physical distancing. Now, I know that we're moving at different paces out of lockdown, but we know that at some point we will be in a different phase, all of us, in which we will have the chance to have some kind of physical connection. We will have some events, and we have to be ready to prepare for that. And how we are going to have our protests, our plays, our conferences in a setting that allows for physical distancing. And we have to be ready for that, because we know that moving forward, and I can share the example of what we're having here in Galicia, we're already in what we call phase 3 of the lifting of the lockdown measures. So we're now allowed to come out and organize some events, but of course we have to make sure that we have at least 1.5 meters between the people participating. So we're trying to find ways in which we can design spaces and have spaces in which this the situation is allowed for, and also, well, all the measures, the face masks and all the things that are required to keep ourselves healthy and safe. We have to think about that when we move forward, and when we also articulate our protests. We do not know what the situation is going to be for November 25th or later next year. But we really have to make sure that we have the conditions for women to participate and to continue grassroots activism in safe conditions. And then my final point has to do with language access. And we need to train. This is not just for the situation now, but I think that the pandemic has forced us to think about this. Many of the times we can participate in these events because we share, and I will put this in inverted commas, we share a language, but we actually don't share it. We are having this conversation in English. Most of these events happen in English, and this is the biggest barrier of all. So if we really want to have participation of those who need to participate, then we need to open the conversation in terms of the languages we use. We have the technology now to allow for example, for simultaneous interpretation. There are platforms such as Zoom, but there are other possibilities that allow for interpreters to be working. So we could have, in this case, a Tamil English interpretation service, or a Galician Tamil interpretation service, if we had the interpreters, which we don't, so that women could follow this presentation without having to give up their language, because we know that most people in the world do not speak English, and it is basic that they do not that we do not give up our languages. We were speaking about biodiversity before. Well, human diversity is as important as the diversity of animals and plants. So languages are part of human diversity, and we need to preserve them. Now, what we have to do as a feminist movement is to make languages a connection and not a barrier. In order to do that, and this is not, as I said, just for online events, this happens also when we organize grassroots work. We need to have feminist interpreters. We need to train interpreters. And this is something that we're not working, it's a topic that we're not really discussing in detail. I'm not aware of any translation and interpreting course in India, though this is supposed to be a multilingual country. But most of the time, people are supposed to give up the language that they speak, or if they do not speak the so-called common language, they're immediately excluded from the conversations. So we really need to think about this. And of course, when we're looking at international conversations, if we really want to have farmers from Galicia, women farmers, interacting with women farmers in India or in the Philippines or wherever we want to, we really need to provide access to interpreters. And this is the only thing that is going to allow marginalized communities and women from marginalized communities to participate and make a change and be able to participate with their own agenda in the feminist movement. So this is not, as I said, this is not just something on the side or something that we add afterwards if we can, or that we leave for later. This is something that we have to do urgently now. And as I said, we have the possibility now with the training, online training opportunities to organize trainings for interpreters. But of course, we need to have universities, we need to have institutions, we need to have the cooperation of people to make this work. Otherwise, whatever we do, be it physically or online or offline, will be always limited to those who are privy to a language that is in itself imbued with power. So we need to really think about all these things when we discuss working together in the time of physical distancing and also generally across borders. So I think that it's now time to open up participation from your side. And I would like to ask you first, before we go into the questions, if you can think about any examples that you've had during this time of lockdown, in which some positive examples in which you have had the chance to do something about the priorities I was discussing, or where you have had the chance to interact with people with whom you do not usually interact for activism, because things have gone online, or because you have found new ways to do things in the times of lockdown. And I will give you an example. It is quite simple and a bit fun, but apart from the chance to participate in events that were usually held on site, for example, with my Filipino feminist friends, they organized a round discussion, a round table about women in film, and I had the chance to take part in it as to be a participant in it, and it was quite interesting to attend something I couldn't have in the usual circumstances. But the example I wanted to share it might sound irrelevant, but again, with my Filipino friends, we decided that we were going to train on Sunday morning. So we found an appropriate time to meet, and several of us prepared some physical exercise routines. I like boxing. I'm a boxer, so I prepared 10 minutes of boxing. Another colleague prepared 10 minutes of yoga. Another colleague prepared 10 minutes of strength exercise. Another colleague 10 minutes of dance. So we managed to keep physically active and together and share our knowledge and our different ways of doing sports or being physically active here and there. And it was a very pleasant hour that we spent every Sunday interacting and sharing fun. And also, I think that physical activity and sport is also an important aspect of women's empowerment. So this is my example, and now maybe you can share yours, and then we can move to the questions. So I will stop sharing my screen now so that we can check the chat and your examples if you have any.
Jayanti, இது நான் வரதுக்கு என்ன பண்ணணும்?
So do you want to use the chat for for this?
You are I'm audible.
I'm checking the chat box because there are many messages, different kinds.
Ma'am, you are audible, ma'am.
Yeah, start. Whoever is interested, then they can raise questions or make clarifications.
Yeah, okay, I'm checking some of the questions, but please, if you have any examples first.
Maria, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, Manimele.
Okay. So I invite the participants. There are around 70 participants. And I wish that they will have some. Some of them came for presenting, but they got disconnected. And I'm happy that you also started having some kind of interaction, though it is something related to the exercises, physical exercises, etc. What we have done, I'm also sharing my example. Let others also join before that I'm waiting for others too. And you can also check the chat box and respond.
Yeah.
So what we have done is, of course, as you said, the women are not homogeneous, and so we always had a concern over the people who are in the grassroots. In fact, currently we are working on a project on sanitation needs of the workers, women workers, including the construction workers, the street vendors, the domestic workers, etc. So we could also understood that in the neighborhood slums where PDI is working, the single woman, the rag pickers, and other such unorganized sector workers who could get wage only when they go out for work. So we could mobilize some support through our own friends, thanks to all the colleagues and other friends who have generously contributed and distributed some support through PDI. And that is one aspect. And second, where I have been I was appointed as the counselor for the students here in Bharatadasan University, and so students also contacted us, and whenever they had any issues, I could address them. So I was in touch with them. But as you said, we didn't have. I think I wish that Maria should have included me also in the Filipino meeting. That is one kind of interaction that we can think of. One issue I wanted to express is that I fully agree that there is a digital divide, and the most vulnerable are not able to access to it. So is there any, of course, one you said about exercise, but still they don't have access to the instruments. So how to reach them? They have to also be done justice to access to such resources. Do you have any experience that is being exercised elsewhere, Maria?
I think that this is one of the biggest problems we have in this situation, that is accessibility to the net, accessibility to even the instruments. You mean the mobile phones or the computers, right? You mean the actual devices, that they don't have them.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things that we always have to consider is that, and I was, it's something that makes me be a bit concerned. Whenever we think about providing accessibility or providing food or providing anything, the first thing we need to make sure is that the people who are going to get it are the ones who are deciding and who are giving us the ideas. So we still have telephones. I think India is actually one of the countries in the world where most people have telephones, mobile phones. So I think that in each household there is at least one mobile phone. So we can still talk to people on the phone. So, you know, this is one of the ways in which, and you were mentioning PDI, People's Development Initiatives, which is a local organization from Trichy, and also working in Salem and in other parts of Tamil Nadu. And they have, in the project that you mentioned, the female infanticide project, of course, the grassroots workers cannot go to follow up the women who are pregnant and to give them counseling, but they have done that through their phones. So they are calling them. So I think that one of the things that we need to ensure is that whatever we want to start, we need to first involve the people who are the ones excluded until now. And sometimes this might involve new strategies, taking up old devices. So we might have to go to, do you remember those group phone calls that we used to have? You know, that there used to be some apps to call several people and have them on the same phone conversation. We might have to go back to that with some people, but make sure, and at least in Tamil Nadu, you also have a very thick network of SAGs. So we can also work through them to get to know exactly how women who are being excluded from the conversations, how they want to have access to the net. Because many times this might mean that they want to have, they might have maybe at the temple or at any kind of common ground that they have, a common hall, they can have resources there or some kind of library or some kind of computers, or they want to discuss, they need somebody to discuss with them with the telephone companies and how they can get a reduced rate for the data, or they might want a grant from the university or from the local government to give them data access. So, there are many different things that we can do, but we first need to discuss it with them and see what the solution is for them, and discuss how, now we have the possibility of interacting online, and if they want to have access to that possibility, what is the solution for them? So we might have to go back to just calling people on the phone, which of course takes some time, but many times is the easiest way to provide participation when we cannot meet physically.
Yeah. So, audience, there are some questions there on the chat box also. Maria?
Yeah, I'm going to go through it.
Yeah.
Okay, first I wanted to start, there is a comment here about the women, the migration, right? The migration of women and of communities, migrant communities, and how there were disturbing visuals in the mainstream media, and women who had access to technology could only involve in armchair activism. Okay, I want to tackle this this question because I think that sometimes activism is not just providing food and doing things like that, which, as I said, we have to be a bit critical of, unless the women who are receiving are involved and deciding what they want to do and what they want to get and how they want to do it. We may be causing more harm than good, and because this reinforces power structures in society. So in this case, being an activist is also calling out on the government, is also calling out on institutions, calling out on the media. So in a situation in which we're all in lockdown, I'm not sure that just passively sitting and watching images is the solution. We have to always interrogate the media too and how they report things, because most of the time they're just consuming the suffering of other people. So I follow the Indian media too. I have seen the images of people migrating. And I was also asking myself, not what women who had access to technology were doing, but what the government is doing. We know that some states even closed their railway system, so they forced migrants to walk back to their places of origin. We know that in the states in which there was no aid for them, they were forced to leave. So this is not a matter of just watching images in the media. And it's not a matter of trying to put the blame on women and academics. It's all of us as citizens have the responsibility to interrogate our governments. And we can do that through petitions. We can do that through demonstrations online. So there are many different methods. Now we're seeing this. Of course, anything that happens in the US is broadcasted everywhere as if this was relevant to the whole world. But we are at least seeing now with the Black Lives Matter demonstrations how people have found ways to do this online. So we can also protest on Twitter. We can send emails to our representatives, to our government, to our MPs, and tell them that in our state, it is not okay to treat people like this. That is also activism. So we cannot go on the streets. We cannot give these people jobs at this moment, but we can all get together and say, this is a problem for us. We do not want these migrant communities to be treated in this way. But this is not just a matter of now. Most of the slums in our cities have these migrant communities. Most of the women who are in the non-formal sector are part of those communities that we now see on television. So the person who is asking this maybe should ask themselves why they were not involved in their problems before, because I know that the Department of Women's Studies and PDI and many others are working with these communities on a daily basis. So this is not a matter of just getting concerned about something when we see it on television. We have to be concerned about all these things before we see them on television, because they are around us. This is like getting concerned about caste discrimination when we see that there was a communal riot or caste killing somewhere. No, this affects our daily lives. It's the same with gender violence. We do not. Why do we only get sensitized when a woman is raped and killed somewhere, when this is happening every day? So maybe the question is how we get involved every day, not just when we see things on the media. So the problem of migrant workers and women is not happening just now. As I said, the pandemic does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in the previous social conditions in which we were living. So it's now helping us realize what the problem was. So now that we know what the problem was, let's go and work to fight against it on a daily basis, not just when it's on the media. So this is just a clarification I wanted to add before we continue.
Yes.
So
there are others also. Could you see them?
Yeah, there are other questions. So what would you suggest as a method to enhance and empower women who do not have a chance to access technologies to connect? Okay, I think that we already discussed this.
You responded to that.
Yeah, and again, I want to emphasize that women are not enhanced or empowered by other people. They are enhanced and empowered by themselves. We just have to open up spaces for them to do it. So we need to change this framework a bit. Many times people who come from social work backgrounds or that kind of mentality, we think that we are going to empower. No, let us give us the space and let women share their knowledge and their own ideas. Is gender discrimination there or not in all fields? Okay. If I understand the comment/question properly, I imagine this is about fields of knowledge or life. Whatever it is, the answer is yes, because gender structures are part of society. Since the moment we are born, people decide, they look at our genitals and they decide whether we are going to be socialized as men or as women. So even if that doesn't even fit what we feel about ourselves, as trans people clearly show us. So unless we change this kind of socialization, of course, there's the gender structure is going to be present. And we know that gender is a structure that causes discrimination. So it doesn't simply divide people in different categories. It creates inequality. So yes, gender discrimination is present in all fields. Okay, something concrete should be done to include sex education in school curriculum. What's your view on this? Well, it's not the topic of this presentation, I think, but of course, I think that sex education should be included in the school curriculum. We know that the less, in particular, women know about their bodies, the less women are seen as full human beings with sexual desires and with the power to decide over their bodies, the higher the incidence of violence is, and the less we speak about sex in a comprehensive, in a non-judgmental way, the more we will have, again, violence. Because we know that many times whenever societies, so sexuality is part of human life. And whenever societies are trying to repress it, it makes life very difficult for everyone. So we really need to think about sex education as part of education in general. We need to know our bodies. We need to know how to live in our bodies and how to interact with other people. And I think sex education, of course, is very important for women, but it's very important for boys and for men to understand that they cannot impose themselves on other people, and that sexuality has to be first based on respecting the other person's body and desires. So yes, I think it's a very important thing that should be included in the school curriculum and elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
The other question is how the government can bring equality, many atrocious discrimination throughout the globe. Well, this is what I said before. It's not the government that has to bring equality. It is every one of us every day. So we have to call out on governments and institutions to make them responsible for what they need to be responsible for, and for basic services, for public health services, for public education. But gender discrimination happens every day. It happens in every single act that we do. Like, it happens in your home, it happens in your street. So unless you start rethinking what you do every day, and how you treat other people and how you see yourself in the world as a man or as a woman, then we can't expect the government to bring equality. Equality is not brought. Equality is created by everyone in society. So I think we need to stop having these questions of how can the government, how can the feminist movement bring equality? Start asking ourselves, how can I relate to others in a more equal way, and find the solution to that daily in our interactions with other people, and being respectful and trying to think about the social patterns that we have internalized and how we have been brought up as men and women in a very clear discriminatory framework. We can read books, we can get knowledge, we can interact with others, we can attend meetings, but in the end, it's us who have to change the way we live and the way we think about other people. Okay, let's check the next one. It's true that technology has helped us to connect to one another and organize some sessions. Okay, how best the women networks could be strengthened to reach the unreached? Well, I think that this is already what we have discussed, right? That
almost,
we need to, think about the caveats that we mentioned. We use previous field contacts to access the women, children from rural areas and help them with their needs. Yeah, again, let us change the language. Let us change the help them with their needs. Okay, let us try to change our perception of women in marginalized communities as being in need of our help with their needs. We are creating poverty, all of us. So we can, whenever we are there to participate and listen to what the women have to say, let us step down of the horse of helping them and try to see ourselves in a different context and just be together in change. Okay, so women herself come forward to meet challenges and how to product. I imagine this is something else that was meant here.
Not clear.
How to act or something in women and children in sexual abuse. Yes, this is one of the things that the lockdown has shown us, that, as I said, the home is the most dangerous place for women and children to be in. So sexual abuse is a very complex situation in which we see how all the things that we have been taught by society are wrong and patriarchal. So society is telling us that fathers have to protect, that men have to protect women and children. That is the first wrong message, which allows for sexual abuse to happen. Because most of the time, as I said, women and children do not expect violence, and least of all of a sexual kind, from those who are supposed to be caring for them. So this is the first thing that we need to deconstruct. Sexual abuse forces us to look into the structure of the family and how the family in itself is a violent space. So unless we start rethinking, that's what I said before, we need to rethink everything. If we really want to help stop sexual abuse, apart from all the palliative measures that we need to introduce, be it legal measures against perpetrators, support measures, counseling for victims, and of course, breaking the silence and not supporting the perpetrators, believing the victims. Apart from all these things that we can do on a short term, if we really want to stop sexual abuse in the long term, then we need to stop thinking about society and the family as we do, because most sexual abuse happens in the family and is perpetrated by men who are close to the victims. So it's either the immediate family or close friends. So we really have to rethink how we educate men in their sexuality, going back to the previous question or comment, men's sexuality in our societies is constructed as predatory. So the bodies of women and children are seen as objects. Again, this is something we're constructing every day. The moment we only tell little girls that they are pretty, we never tell them that they are intelligent, that they're strong, that they're capable. They're already learning that they are objects to be looked at. And men already are learning that these are objects to be used. So there are so many things we have to change to end sexual abuse that I think we need to start today, because otherwise we will never reach a moment in which we will see a decrease in sexual abuse and in sexual violence in general. Okay, let us check whether there's something else. Women are overburdened with domestic chores and they are happy with a phone, but very difficult to bring them together for a common cause is a real challenge. Well, I'm not sure which women you're talking about, but in my experience, this is not true. So I cannot respond to this because in my experience, women are not happy with a phone. Women are happy with the support of other women. Whether they find this through a phone nowadays or they find it outside on the street or in their homes, that is not the thing. And as we have seen, women have managed to unite all over the globe, despite all the difficulties, because while it is very easy for men to unite, and we see it in liquor shops often, for women, there are many barriers, starting with just coming out of the home. So I think that women do come together easily if we provide the space, if we provide the means to do it. So I'm not really sure where this comment is coming from. Okay, according to you, what is the biggest hurdle or disturbance in the path of women's empowerment? Maybe our own mindset, because there are many obstacles, but we're all creating them every day. So if every time that you have to hire a service or buy something, you bought it from a woman, you would already be supporting them. For example, if every time a woman comes and says that she's been abused, we listen to her and we supported her instead of supporting the guy who abused her, then that would be a change in itself. So the most important hurdle for women's empowerment is everybody. So we need to change ourselves and the way we think about society. Okay, we often notice trans women as more susceptible to injustices and lost opportunities. How can we become more inclusive in our approach? Well, I think that, of course, trans women are subjected to discrimination because they are not seen as women in society. They're not even allowed. I think that there's this horrendous trans bill going on in the Indian Parliament. They're not even seen as human beings with full human rights. So it is, as I said, we have to lobby, we have to be on their side, and that in itself makes our approach more inclusive. So if we want to make our approach more inclusive, again, we need to change our perspective, because the person who is saying our approach is, of course, not a trans woman. So the solution is not adding trans women to the other women, but the other women, that is cisgender women like myself, joining trans women in their demands for justice. That is how you make any movement more inclusive. You do not bring the marginalized in, you join them. So if you want to fight caste oppression, and you're not from a lower caste, from an SC or an ST group, you do not bring those people into your movement, but you join and support their claims. You give them their space. You give them you just give them the acting power, and you support their claims. That's how we do it. So if we want to support, if we as cisgender women want to support trans women, what we have to do is join their struggle and of course, we have to be present whenever they organize something, whenever they claim for their rights. We have to be there to support them. We have to issue statements. We have to go to their demonstrations if they want us there and they allow us there. And of course, in whatever we organize, trans women are women, so they should be part of whatever we do. But we should be part of what they want to do. And I think that when I say that we have to change our perspective, I'm talking about these kinds of things. Okay, we have something else. This migrant crisis can be an opportunity. Yes. We're responsible for everything. Okay, women have space. We're responsible for everything. But the thing is that women give space means adjustment. Not sure I understand this, but in any case, I don't think that women should be responsible for everything. I think that every person in society should be responsible for everything that they do. Okay, relief part. Okay, there we have comments. Let's see whether we still have any questions. Okay, so there is a question here. How will we define domestic violence now when it also they're in the workplace? Well, I think that nobody wants to go back to the term domestic violence, and we have debunked that term, and I encourage you not to use it, precisely because, and we speak about gender violence now as the appropriate concept, because violence against women happens everywhere. And it happens, it's not just physical violence or sexual violence, it's also economic violence, psychological violence, lack of opportunities, lack of rights. So the global term we have for that is gender violence. Then if you want to speak about particular instances of violence that happen against women, then we can use the term specific for them. So if we're speaking about the workplace, it's usually sexual harassment at the workplace, and we have legal instruments to tackle that. And for example, we need to have other approaches to the violence that happens, for example, in public transportation, which we used to call eve-teasing. I hope that everybody has stopped using that horrible term that seems to make it like a funny event that happens, an irrelevant event. We're calling that gender violence too, gender violence in public transportation and the public space. So let us stop talking about domestic violence, because violence, as we see, doesn't just, of course it happens in the home very often, but it doesn't just happen there, and it happens in many more ways. So let us try to forget about this concept that is actually a way of trying to tell us also that it's not such an important thing. So it's a domestic thing. It's something that happens in the house. So for many years, we were using this term, and nobody kind of took the matter seriously, even though we know that the number of women who are battered, who are raped, and who are killed in their homes is staggering. So we really need to think that feminism is also about the language and about the terms that we use. So yes, let us, if you stay away from the term domestic violence and you use gender violence, then it also includes the workplace, and it includes anything that is part of that structure of discrimination. Okay. So we have some suggestions here, some ideas, like Ispanchat can have migrant support, a facilitation center. So see, we already have the chance to have a fruitful discussion on solutions. But let us not forget that the migrant women and children also have to say what they would like to do. Okay. There's a question here. If a woman is saying that she has faced abuse, but in reality she's not, she's just taking revenge to men. Well, this sounds like the plot of a Tamil movie, but let me disclose, this doesn't happen in reality. The violence that women face after the fact. So if you have been raped or you have been battered, and you come out and tell this to other people, most often the reaction is to accuse you of something. So I don't think, and all women know this, all women know that whenever they have been raped or assaulted, that the risk of not being believed is higher than the trauma that they will endure if keeping quiet. So many times we know that women do not usually report rape. This is one of the tasks in which the feminist movement has been working very hard. Now, why do people believe that this situation is actually plausible? Because we see it in the media, we see it in the films. This is the way the patriarchal establishment undermines the credibility of all victims. So please let us stop discussing this. Imagine, I always give this example. Imagine we're all in a room, or here in the virtual room, and somebody comes in and says, somebody stole my bike or somebody stole my car. What would we do? I'm sure we would call the police. We would go around to see what happened and who is the person who stole the bike, if anybody has seen anything. We would never think, the first thing that would come to our minds is not, oh, this person is lying. I'm sure they didn't steal their bike. I'm sure they didn't steal their car, right? So this is our natural reaction when somebody comes and reports a crime, is to call the police and investigate and see what has happened and where is the bike, and et cetera, et cetera. The only exception to this rule is whenever we speak about sexual violence. And we need to think very hard as a society why we do this. Why we still have people questioning whether a woman is taking revenge on a man. If a woman wants to take revenge on a man, there are easiest ways to do it than exposing yourself to being criticized, ostracized, and actually assaulted verbally by society as a whole. So let us stop questioning victims. Let us investigate the case, but believing the victim first. So whenever a woman or a child comes to you and tells you that she has been abused, that she has been raped, the first thing you need to do is to believe them. Even if this woman, even if you don't like this woman, even if this woman has had sex with 30,000 people, even if this woman has been walking naked down the street, there is nothing that justifies rape or sexual assault. So we have to stop judging women on what they did before, what they did after, what they were wearing, who they were with, in order to believe them whenever they say that they've been assaulted. And this is even worse for children. Children don't lie about sexual assault. If anybody thinks that children are lying or are being manipulated into lying about sexual assault, they should check themselves, not the kids. So we really need to stop having these questions. Just believe the victim. After that, and support the victim. You know, everything will take its course afterwards. And we know that justice is not fair towards women most of the time. But if we want to make justice work, the first thing we need to start doing is stop asking these questions and suggesting that this is women taking revenge of men. Let us also call out on all the films and all the media who are spreading this kind of stereotype, because they're damaging the credibility of all the victims of sexual assault. So I hope that this is at least clear for everyone, because this is something that really bothers me whenever I see this. Okay, what makes you feel empowered as a woman? That's a very long question to answer, but I will just say that being supported by other women is what makes me feel empowered as a woman, and having a community of women who are supporting each other, and we can all be part of it. Okay. We can't deny the fact there are still some women who are not ready to empower themselves or change their mindset regarding it. They accept the things by saying that this is my fate and my responsibility. Okay. I am going to just say this. The fact that, so the main target of patriarchal education is women. The patriarchy needs to control women because in their understanding and in its structuring of society, we are the ones who are supposed to convey the norms to children and to others as carers. So the fact that women accept their situation is, of course, a natural outcome of the patriarchal upbringing. Women are brought up to support the patriarchy. So the fact that we have feminists and that we have women who are empowered and who rebel against the structure is in itself a miracle. So stop putting the blame on women who are supporting the structure, and let us look at those who benefit from it. And definitely this is not the women. So I think that we need to stop judging women who support the patriarchy. Of course, we don't enjoy that, and we wish that things were not like that. But we have to understand that, of course, women support, just any system of oppression can only continue because it has the support of those which it oppresses. So in the case of the patriarchy, of course, women are going to accept the patriarchal structure and support it in many ways. Like we have the mother-in-laws many times being violent to their daughters-in-law, but this is not, this is what they have been socialized to do. So we can always try to discourage them from that through conversations and through mediation and bringing them together with other women and trying to change their ways. But we need to understand that this is the patriarchy itself is creating that situation. And as I said, still, it's not the women who benefit from it. So let us put the focus on those who benefit from it. It's like when we speak about sexual violence, we're always putting the focus on the victim. Let us look at the perpetrators. Let us look at who they are. Or when we talk about prostitution, or when we talk about brutality of the police against trans women, let us look at the perpetrators. Let us look at the men. Let us discuss them, because they are the ones who are benefiting from this structure. They are the ones who are getting the jobs. They are the ones who are not sharing the burden of care. They are the ones for which society is structured. So instead of putting the blame on the women who are following patriarchal structures, let us look at those who benefit from them. And I'm sure it's not the women who support them. Okay, I think this was the last question. How are we doing with time? I'm a bit lost with the time change. It's 9 o'clock here, so.
Here it is 12:20, 12:25.
Okay.
Yeah. The last question you can attend, I can close then.
Which is the last one?
Nothing? Okay.
Did I miss one? No, the other ones are comments.
Okay. Others are all comments. Yeah.
There's one here. Don't you think the term men and women are already socially constructed and value-loaded terms by using this word?
There is one movie, Ponmagal.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. But you know what happens is that, of course, they're socially constructed, men and women. But unless we understand how they are constructed and how we inhabited them, we cannot undo them. And whenever we speak, well, male and female is like men and women. I don't see any different. It's socially constructed too. And transsex is not even a term. The term is transgender, and it doesn't have anything to do with this male-female that you're mentioning, because we have transgender men and transgender women too, and then we have people who are gender neutral. That's a different thing. So, of course, men and women are terms developed in societies that have decided to divide individuals based on some random features. But as I said, if we really want to discuss the patriarchy and work against it, first we need to understand what these terms mean. Because one of the things I'm usually irritated about is like when people say, oh, you know, we should not be feminists, we should be humanists. Oh, we should not speak about men and women, we should just speak about people. Well, if you speak about people, then you do not see that some of those people, those who are termed women, do not have access to jobs, do not have access to health. Actually, one of the most important steps that the feminist movement achieved was to have gendered statistics, so that we know that the people who are being killed, for example, how many of them are women and how many of them are men, and in what circumstances. This is the only thing that allows us to speak about gender violence. So unless we see society in the way it operates, we cannot change it. Now, another thing is that we support those terms. That's different. But we really need to acknowledge them, and we need to speak about them, because this is the same as for everything. If we do not speak about white people and people who are non-white or upper caste and lower caste people, then how, of course, these are also terms that are socially constructed. They don't exist as such out of the social construction. So, but unless we have those terms, we cannot discuss the inequality that exists in society, and we cannot work against the social definitions of what being a woman means. So the problem is not that we have the term woman or man, but what it means to inhabit that term. So I think that this is what we need to be discussing, and that's why it's still important, even though I'm very happy when I see people who are gender neutral or who do not want to be addressed with any kind of gendered name. And of course, we also have to consider this in light of colonization, because we know that many communities, many societies did not have these two terms before they were colonized by the West. So of course, it's an intricate discussion, but I don't think that we can just dismiss man and woman in our analysis because they are socially constructed. Of course they are, but we need to understand what they mean before we can undo them.
Okay. I think there is one question from Renuka, but you are not aware of that movie, Tamil, Ponmagal Vanda.
Yeah, okay. It was
about a girl who was the child abused issue, who in her childhood still got abused, and the whole movie is all about her, and she became an advocate later, and she would be disclosing this in the court that she herself was the abuser. But her question is it necessary to openly show that there in that movie, and will it not perpetrate? That is a question. I think it is. I think whatever has been talked totally for the whole day session is breaking here. That's what I feel. You have to come out, you have to open up, isn't it? What, Maria?
Yeah, but we're speaking about, one thing is the victims themselves, that they come out to other people.
Yeah, victim herself.
Another thing is the depiction of it. And there's a line there. So the victims are allowed to speak in whichever terms they want to speak. But whenever there is a depiction of it, a representation of it through, for example, a movie, is the movie made by the victims themselves? I don't think so.
No.
No. So this is like the consumption of sexual abuse. It's also quite dangerous. So because it's disrespectful towards the victims, it's triggering for the victims. So you can make a movie. If the movie is done from a feminist perspective, it means that one of the aspects that they have to take care of is the privacy of the victims. So, you know, you cannot just show scenes of rape or sexual abuse in a very crude way, because I don't think that's respectful for the victims of sexual abuse and rape. And unless they want this that way, and this is not the case in any feature film I'm familiar with. I'm not aware of any feature film that has been made by a victim of rape or sexual abuse trying to speak about her case. You can have a documentary about that. And of course, in a documentary, you're not going to see the fact of somebody being raped. So we have to be very careful with these things, because the depiction many times is just consumed by society. It's like showing pictures of dead children after a catastrophe. Is that really necessary? And many times we have to think about how these things also show inequalities in society. So for example, just imagine that one of your family members is in hospital, and are you going to allow somebody to show pictures of this person while they're suffering, or while they're naked, or being treated? Of course not. But we allow the pictures of people who are in marginalized communities to be disseminated in such circumstances. Even when we were talking about the migrants, many times the depictions of these communities are not dignified. So we really need to think about the fact that human rights have to also be respected in depictions, in films. So, and in the media, I'm not sure that if somebody really wants to tackle the issue of sexual abuse and child abuse, they of course can do it, and they can use many different ways, and they can use films, they can use theater, but I'm not sure that depicting the actual rape of a child helps any victim in their claims. Why do we need to see that to believe victims or to empathize with them? I think that this doesn't give a very good message for all of us if we only empathize with child abuse victims because we see a man raping a child. I don't think that this is the way. Like, I know that Tamil filmmakers are very happy in showing gory stuff. But
I wish to clarify here. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was not the incident which was shown, but the girl who got abused came out later, and she was fighting for that. And normally people don't allow the person who is abused to come out and disclose open. So throughout the movie, she would be, without disclosing her identity, she would be fighting for. At the end, it was most all fabricated, and the case was against the victim. There only she had to, actually she disclosed that she herself is the victim. So it was not that the picture that was all shown, but the whole narration, how the child abuse is happening, and how this Jyoti has presented well. And I think this is like breaking the silence that people do not disclose, but here this girl can come out and disclose. That is the perspective in which it was presented in the movie.
Yeah, then that's important, because I think that we need to show society how we create the violence. So if a woman or a child is raped, of course that's a violent act. But the most violent act is that they never get justice. They are not even allowed to express what happened. And that injustice, we are all creating it. So if the movie helps open up this conversation, I think that it's a really important movie. That's what I said. We really need to see from which perspective the movie is made. Yeah. Because many times, as we were discussing, victims of abuse are questioned. So they do not want to come out. Every woman knows that if she comes to somebody and says, I've been raped, the first thing she's going to get is questioning. So they're going to question her. That's why women don't come out. That's why women don't come and share. And after that first step, they know that they will have to go, if they decide to go to court, it's going to be very difficult to prove that this person raped them. We know that even in cases where there is a recording of the fact, the men are acquitted. So it's really difficult. That's why I get so irritated when people are questioning, oh, but a woman may do this to manipulate. Which woman? Find me the woman. Like, I cannot think of any woman who is ready to expose herself to such attacks and, and such a situation if she doesn't really, if she hasn't been raped, in fact. So let us stop. And if one of them does it, we do not care. This is not an excuse. I'm sure that people also go to the police station and report their missing motorbike and it hasn't been stolen. But that doesn't invalidate all the other claims, right, of somebody getting their motorbike stolen. So we have to be very careful. And if this movie contributes to discussing how victims of rape and sexual abuse are treated, then it's a good thing, and we should have more films like that. Then I'll be sure to watch it next time I'm in Tamil Nadu.
Okay, so thank you, Maria. I think we have done. Is there any?
Thank you all.
Do you see any other questions? It's very interesting that even if we have had face-to-face interaction, we would not have had so much clarity. So you have thrown light on all the aspects, right from the issues of the pandemic and physical distancing, and started traveling to the other issues that the participants have raised. And there are around 91 participants at the last, and they were also very active, raising questions, appreciating, making comments, etc. And I think definitely some kind of deconstruction would have gone on gender, through this discourse, and people will start thinking. And this is the minute that we have to start working, as repeatedly Maria was pointing, that we should not question others, we should not simply blame others, rather we should ask and start acting. That is the perspective in which we close the session today. So thank you very much, Maria, for being here for more than an hour. Actually, we planned till 12 o'clock, but it was going, thanks to the media, I mean, this technology also, it hasn't interrupted us. It's keep going. And definitely this is recorded and will be shared to other friends also who are not able to attend or connect themselves. So would you like to say anything more?
Thank you so much for being here and for inviting me. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the week. I'm sure that all the sessions are going to be exciting, so do not miss them. And and thank you so much for having me. Despite the physical distance, we are still very close.
Yeah, we have started that before. We have started forging that. Okay, so let us hope for the other 6 days all the participants be there, and I wish Maria to also continue to stay with us also when time permits. Okay, thank you all participants for your wonderful interaction. And see, as rightly pointed out by Maria, that we are going to